We were all cherry-cheeked anime fans at some point. Sadly, that time usually ends with a bang. It's time for bad anime shows to get what they finally deserve. No matter how many episodes or how bad it is, I'll prevail and beat them all. It's time for Undroppable.
Ever watch a show whose first 2 minutes have very little bearing on how the rest of the show will be? Well, that sums up how I went into this one. So no beating around the bush, let's jump into Akane-iro ni Somaru Saka, of which I'll use the shortened Akasaka, as you gotta love how even the Japanese can't be arsed saying the full titles of stuff, and make fun shortened versions, of which I am extremely thankful. This is based on the adult visual novel by Feng, released in 2007, you know, the ones with all those dirty sex scenes in that everyone plays them for, or so I've heard. But if you're boring, then a version without all the sex was released in 2008, under the title Akasaka Parallel, as well as a port for the PSP appearing in 2009. As Japan actually had games for the PSP, while we in the West got Jack and had to make the most of it, till you got your hands on all those Japanese games not released in the West. Akasaka also got 2 light novels, one written by Mitsuki Mizusaki and the other by Mao Shinji, and a radio show aired in 2008, not to mention a manga released in Compase in 2008, with illustrations by Amara Sakazuki, with the anime being the last of all these different versions, released in the fall of 2008 by Studio TNK. So it must have done something right to get all this, as nothing mediocre gets all of this. Unless you slap Miku's face on it, then you get to print money, so you know the routine by now. Not gonna lie on this one, when the first things I see is original story by Feng, I get worried, as it makes me wonder if what I watched actually is the same story as the other adaptations, or if I'm just watching the same characters doing something else in a self-contained microcosm, so as to not taint the Akasaka canon. But no, from what I can tell, this just refers to the first game, and not something new, like original usually is used to denote. Which is good, means I don't have to play the game, as it's just the anime but with no sex sprinkled in like croutons with each girl's face on. The opening 5 seconds are the best and most confusing I've ever had the luxury of watching, and it plays like a James Bond movie. We later learn these 2 are the parents of our lead character Junichi and his sister Minato, and have done their son a solid and set him up for marriage with an old friend's daughter. They just haven't told him, or anyone outside of themselves and their friend. In fact, while it's fun to watch them do super spy antics, they are really terrible parents, which is a plot point in the show, as when we start we know Junichi is nicknamed Geno Killer, something he came up with himself. How he came to call himself that I have no idea, so I'll slap Chuni syndrome on it, as you can explain any stupid stuff in anime nowadays with that. At the start we only get stories from passers-by and his friends saying stuff in a very mocking way, so we never really know how much is real, but later we do know that he did engage in street fighting a lot, as a means of keeping people away from himself. As due to his parents leaving him to travel with their daughter, Junichi has been alone feeling abandoned for roughly 10 years of his life. So his people skills are very lacking due to this, along with the relationships with his family members being very estranged in how they're dealt with due to these many years of absence. This has also affected Minato, with her even joking that she is adopted, as this is how she feels like sometimes. In the game, she is actually revealed to be Junichi's blood-related sister, while in the anime and manga, it is left more ambiguous. So, back onto the plot. The bride-to-be is Yuhi, the daughter of a vastly wealthy family, and as such is the head of the family that decides the male heir. As they don't want their wealth and influence going to someone not worthy, Yuhi, not happy with this situation, says she'll be the judge of Junichi's character, and if she finds him lacking, then the engagement will be null and void. But her father says she must live at Junichi's house for him to take her judgment seriously, so she does, and thus enters the 12-episode series of Yuhi and Junichi learning more about each other and their feelings, while also keeping Yuhi living at Junichi's secret, which turns out were all pointless, as they all knew she was living there, as well as how Yuhi and Junichi had pretty much loved each other from minute 1, as well as the ending, which I should talk about since it's pretty big. So you know how visual novel dating games are usually adapted. They pick a single route and do that, but have some events from the supporting cast thrown in to give them more fleshing out. Well, they do the Yuhi route pretty well, as she is the main lass and the story is about her and Junichi, so it fits. But then the last few episodes hit and we suddenly change to the Minato route. And in the end, both him and his sister confess their love for each other, but they don't go any further than that, or at least we don't see them do any more than that, as it's left up to our imaginations. But I would like to point out that every character in this seems fine that Junichi and Minato do this, like he's just confessing to a childhood friend, but she's his sister, which ends up leaving a really odd taste in my mouth. But at least Karen actually reacts like a normal person to this situation, as all throughout the show she is pictured as someone who is really not in touch with how the world actually works, being a super wealthy girl herself. And while on that note, the whole supporting cast is really not interesting or fleshed out, maybe apart from Karen. They do get a bit more in the OVA, but it just sounds like someone reading a very watered down bunch of notes on them, while we watch them strut their stuff in a swimsuit. Also, what was it with Nagami? Is she an alien, or a wizard, or what? She can extinguish fire with her hands, and we see her with another version of herself at the very end of the series, but we get nothing, probably less than nothing, as anything involving her is more confusing, but she's there. These two things add up to a very odd mix-up in this show. As I followed it pretty well, then the last few episodes hit and my brain just went out the window, never to return. Props to this show, if anything. They did the sister love ending before it was cool. So congrats, you win? I will say the manga does choose a different ending from the anime, continuing the expected Yuhi ending, but probably for the truest sense, one would have to play the game. Yes, I know, I should probably cut it some slack, as adapting a visual novel is very tricky, as you have to cut down dozens, maybe even hundreds of dialogue, and splice it together into a very short amount of time, but there is doing it well, and doing it bad, and I don't really have to say which this falls into, as it should speak for itself. So now I'm a few brain cells lighter, I'm up for anything now, so I'll see you guys in the next Undroppable.